Welcome to Sun Times Game Week. You'll notice that we're missing one of our three here. Annie Costable's on assignment today, so you just get Michael O'Brien and myself, Beth Long, to chat through all of the new news, the Super 25 rankings, and all of that fun stuff with high school football here in the Chicago area. First, I want to start by thanking our content partner, ABC7. So for you ABC7 viewers, welcome to the show. It'll be a fun one with the two of us today, certainly. And we'll start with some news. As always, some basketball news.
We got some basketball, not a lot of basketball news. It was kind of a quiet week overall, but we did get the When Sides Collide shootout, which in the last 4 or 5 years has become one of the big events of the season. We got the lineup. Starts out with Normal West at Evanston. Evanston's going to be one of the best teams in the area. Normal West was going to be one of the best teams in the state, but Francis Okoro, their star, left, so they're not super great, but they already had the invite, so Normal West is here.
You're in, I guess.
Yeah, then you got Glenbard East and Glenbard West. That's the host, the big rivalry at 2:30, and then we get into the big games. St. Viator against Bloom. That's just a fun matchup. Two teams from, two far areas, that would never play. It's kind of you've never heard that before, St. Viator Bloom. Both are going to be top 10, top 15. So that's going to be great. That's at 4:15. And then a Simeon against Bolingbrook, obviously a big one. That's at 6. And then Bennett and Naperville North wrap things up at 7:30. It's weird. They haven't played since 2014. Bennett, young team. They've got a lot of size. They should be, maybe near the end of the rankings. And Naperville North has Gene Nolan as coach now. They have Tom Welch, who's a great soccer player and a great basketball player, going to Loyola. So the last 3 games are really great. It should be a nice crowd. That'll be fun. Other news, you probably saw it on the website, Marquise Jacobs, who was going to be our best player in the city and maybe one of the best in the state, but he didn't have a huge national profile, and even locally, I don't think anybody'd call him a household name. Well, he has a Nike commercial now that's been going around, and Nike's been tweeting out, so that's changed quite a bit. His profile has been raised an awful lot, and it's going to be interesting to see how that influences Uplift and the season. It's funny, I talked to David Taylor, the Uplift coach, and he didn't even know it was happening.
Oh.
He saw it like everybody else. And
that'd be quite a surprise.
Yeah, and David was like, yeah, that's definitely going to put a bit of a target on Marquise's back. So it's going to be interesting to see how Marquise Jacobs handles that. It's just going to be a lot of pressure, and everybody's going to be coming at him. And then we had some football news. I think the biggest was Michael Love, who we've talked about a lot. Had a video of Michael Love. He's a star at Nazareth. His brother is Julian Love at Notre Dame, and he decommitted from Bowling Green. I think it was just this summer that he committed, right?
Yep, he's only, I think maybe June is when he committed.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this a little before we went on air. It's not incredibly strange coming from someone who kind of got into this starting recruiting to see commits change their mind around this point in the college football season particularly. We were taking a look at Bowling Green's record. They're 1-3. Yes, it's a little short-sighted to decommit because a team is 1-3, and maybe they don't love the style of offense they're running. They don't love the style of defense they're running. Maybe they had coaching changes last fall and weren't exactly sure what to expect. So it is pretty normal, and it wouldn't shock me knowing how early a lot of the senior class committed. And in fact, Michael Love was one of the later ones to commit in the 2019 class. That's well, it's the 2019 class. It wouldn't shock me to see a little bit more shakeup. And of course, maybe he's getting interest from bigger schools. It wouldn't surprise me. He's incredibly athletic, especially with kids that are like a little undersized according to what a college would normally recruit, like Julian.
Yeah. And JJ McCarthy's having such a great year, and it seems like colleges are all over him. There's probably a lot of colleges at those games. I hadn't thought about that.
Yep, it's all interconnected and sort of very strange, but you just never know what's going on in the background of a recruiting.
So we will watch that one. The other news, I think this is kind of interesting because we made such a big deal about it last year. Everybody did, all the public league schools that dropped football. We got a final list from the CPS. We had reported that we knew 5 or 6. There were a couple extra. So the full list of CPS schools that canceled football this year: Austin, Chicago Tech, Douglas, Farragut, Gage Park, Golder, North Grand, and Uplift. North Grand and Golder were the 2 I wasn't sure about. But I think this is interesting, and CPS sent this over in the note about it, that those 8 schools did drop football, but a lot of schools added football. So it's only a net loss of 1. Last year there were 84 schools that played football. This year there's 83. So really things are about even. And a lot of these schools are very small. Less than 200 kids, some of them. So really we only lost 1 football program in the city this year. Everybody's talking about how football is dying. I think that's kind of a pretty good sign for football overall.
Absolutely. Is it though? Sounds like it's not. Interesting. All right, the news is wrapped up. It's time for the Super 25. Michael told me he liked a few of my additions this week, so maybe
But-
you guys will too.
But Loyola's still in.
There it is. There it is. There's a big question. Is Loyola still in? Yes, you're still in, Loyola. Just don't lose again because I can't keep you in after that. All right, 25. Making a resurgence back into the rankings, IC Catholic. 24, Bolingbrook. 23, Hinsdale Central. 22, still hanging on there, Prairie Ridge. 21, newcomer, Wabanzi Valley. Really secretly, quietly having a good year. Getting ready to take on Neuqua Valley for the second time this year already, so we'll see what happens in round 2. Wheaton Warrenville South, number 20, even after that loss to Batavia. Batavia is pretty good, just solidified that, I think, for all of us. 19, Phillips. 18, you're still right there, Loyola, even after that overtime win against St. Ignatius. 17, our highest debut for a newcomer this week is Oswego East after a 29-0 shutout win over, at that point, undefeated Plainfield South. So I think a pretty impressive statement by Oswego East. 16, Willowbrook. 15, Montini. Got a big game coming against Loyola this week. We'll see. 14, Cary Grove continues to climb a little bit. 13, Marist. 12, Richards has been quietly really performing. They've been flittering between that 12 and 15 mark this year, and I'm pretty excited to see what they do in the next couple of weeks. 11, Mount Carmel. 10, Evanston stays right where they were after a very close game against Maine South. 9, Glenbard West. 8, Maine South. 7, Brother Rice. 6, Simeon. 5, Oswego. 4, Homewood Flossmoor. 3, Nazareth, speaking of Michael Love. 2, Batavia, which Michael got to see live this past week. And number 1, Lincoln Way East, no change there. The teams that went out this week went out swinging, but went out Barrington with a 21-12 loss at Conant. I just couldn't keep him in.
Some of us thought Barrington was leaving for sure.
Michael called this one last week. Huntley also, that 48-7 loss at Crystal Lake South was just a little bit too much for me to keep you guys in there too. And Stevenson, I don't think Lake Zurich is a bad team, but a 23-20 overtime loss versus a Lake Zurich team that really doesn't have any signature wins, albeit they are 4-1, dropped Stevenson out of the rankings this week.
That's getting to be a difficult conference to figure out.
Yep.
Top of it. Yeah, that's a little confusing. Stevenson, Lake Zurich. I think, does Lake Zurich, they might have a big game again this week as
They
well.
play Evanston, right?
Yeah. Oh,
No?
I don't.
No, that's New Trier. New Trier is another one I have my eye on.
Yeah, I think Lake Zurich has somebody, but yeah, because we were so high on them to start the season, and then a little bit rough, but then a big win against Stevenson. So good for them. Let's talk about this past week a little bit, week 5. Batavia, Wheaton Warrenville South, 41-21 Batavia. We all knew Batavia was good. They're good.
Surprise!
Big shocker, yeah. They're very good. But I was impressed with Wheaton Warrenville South. They lost by 21 points, but it was a close game. They were driving with a chance to make it a one-score game late. They're a very capable team. Noah Henkel's the quarterback. He had 229 yards passing. Considering you're on the road at Batavia, that great defense, I think Wheaton Warrenville South, deserved their ranking. I was impressed for a team that nobody expected much out of. They should be able to make a nice run in the playoffs. And Michael Janzi Jr., I mean, geez, I think he played, he had 8 carries for 121 yards. I think those might have been only 8 or 9 plays on offense.
Yeah,
he had all those yards. Yeah,
he's not even an offensive player, really. He's a linebacker.
He was something else. And Batavia, you wonder, they're number 2 right now. I think on the right day, they could definitely handle Lincoln Way East. They just were the type of team that they can get whatever they want when they want it. It's pretty scary.
Speaking of Batavia, too, you guys might have noticed that we put out a player or unit of the week last week. Last week, it was Homewood Flossmoor's defensive line. Congratulations, you guys were the first ones. Week number 2 is a player. It is Quinn Erweiler from Batavia.
17 carries for 108 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also had a huge fumble recovery. That was a real key moment in that Batavia win. He was, I guess Dennis Pyron, the coach, said that he was an unknown a couple weeks ago, but they all knew he was good.
Not anymore.
And yeah, the secret is out. Yeah, they're just loaded with talent. Batavia, and a nice crowd. That was really fun. I'm enjoying my 2 sojourns into the western suburbs so far this year.
He may never leave.
Yeah, the last couple of years, I don't usually get out there. We have the Daily Herald partnership, so we get the games from out there, so I haven't gone out there much. But yeah, football seems to mean a lot more in the western suburbs.
With Batavia, too, and this is curious because the 2 guys that you brought up played both ways, and it seems like that's kind of a theme for Batavia. Yeah. Among the top teams, you don't often see a lot of 2-way players because they're often more deep than the other teams. They have more just depth on the roster. Do you think that is playing to their advantage?
I think so, and I think we're seeing a lot like Maine South. Dave and Sarah never used to do that, but they're doing it now. We're going to talk about that game in a little bit, but Danny Wolf scored a touchdown on offense and on defense. So I think maybe that's happening with the declining numbers some places. There's just a lot more people, I think, playing both ways.
You assume it's the numbers, right? And then there's also like the old camp of like keep your best players on the field, right? Sort of like with Maine South and Pete Skoronsky. Like, why would you take that kid off the field? I don't know. I wouldn't if I were the coach. And I wonder if some of the coaches are kind of starting to just look at that a little bit differently. Like, it's actually not a bad thing if I keep Michael Chancey Jr. on the field.
He definitely is, and it seems like Batavia's doing it smartly though too. Michael Janzi and Luke Wirtz aren't on offense constantly. They're in there when they need them. And I guess that was another key factor in that Batavia game we should mention. Batavia's starting running back got hurt in the second quarter and was out. So they needed to use Quinn Weiler and Jancy. It was kind of, a fill-in by committee, and they, still managed to win that one. Beth, you were at Brother Rice Providence, which was a little bit more lopsided than.
Yeah, it seems like every game I go to is a little more lopsided than we anticipate that it's going to be. The last 2 weeks have been Homewood Flossmoor, Bolingbrook, and then Brother Rice Providence. The thing is, both those two games I've left not thinking that Providence was bad by any means or that Bolingbrook was bad by any means, just how good Brother Rice and Homewood Flossmoor are. Brother Rice was the first team that I've been to this year that I actually changed my mind several times throughout the game what was actually the best unit on the field. First I was like, wow, Brother Rice's defense, this is one of the best ones I've seen all year. They're definitely the best part of the team. And then I changed my mind to, wow, their special teams is actually making a lot of plays. Maybe they're the best unit on the field. And then the third one was the wide receivers because, they were just probably the best core of wide receivers that I've seen all year. Two of them, Dylan Summers and Anthony Arquilla, were the two standouts, and it was every single time they needed to make a play, they were there. They're pretty big, pretty long, very athletic. And then after the game, talking to some of the coaching staff, it was clear that they didn't really know what the best part of the team was either, which is quite a problem to have.
Yeah, I think it's John Bean, that quarterback. He always makes the right call. And, he's got those receivers, but their running game isn't great. He kind of seems to do a little bit of that. But yeah, their team. I wonder how good Brother Rice really is. I wasn't sure when I saw them.
I left feeling very justified that they were at number 7. I think that depending on how they put together wins, and the big thing for them is they won 2 games last year. So as they continue to win, what does that look like and feel like as a team? Winning is not easy. You got to win and then you have to act like winners. And coming off a year that was
that bad,
fairly abysmal for them.
And you could say that win they had at Marist week 1 might be the best win anybody has.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a great resume builder. Speaking of big wins, Lincoln Way East destroyed rival Lincoln Way Central 38-0. But the big news in this one, AJ Henning, who we've talked so much about but has not played any football at all season, finally played. 5 carries for 77 yards, and he had a 54-yard TD reception. You got to think this was his warm-up for next week.
And that's kind of crazy that averaging 15 yards a carry is your warm-up.
Yeah, I guess his hip's feeling better.
Seems like you're bursting onto the scene. One thing to note, too, is that even though Henning had only 77 yards on 5 carries, their ground game was ridiculous and accounted for 347 yards of their total offense, which is just mind-blowing. Behind really the legs of 3 different guys, and that's got to be fairly terrifying if you have Lincoln Way East on your schedule.
So HF, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but HF Lincoln Way East is coming up, and HF's much ballyhooed defense is going to get a real test. Trying to log into this computer to see if anybody has questions. We didn't even mention it, but if you do have questions, please mention them here on the Facebook, and we will try to answer them. Next up, Maine South Evanston. We talked a little bit about this one. 21-13, Maine South wins. Danny Wolf, who we talked about, he had 81 yards rushing and a touchdown, also an interception return TD. Kind of an interesting nugget from this one. Maine South is still figuring it out. Mm-hmm. Bobby and Sarah went down their quarterback in, week 2 with the injury. And they haven't really found a running back. They've been running 3 or 4 guys. Danny Wolf was the 4th guy to play running back in that game, and then he kind of held on to it in the second half there. So maybe they've found an answer at running back, and that's a thing where it seems like Dave and Sarah is just picking his best athletes and giving them a shot at running back to try to find something that works. And I think it's a little scary that Maine South is just trying to figure things out, and they're beating all these really good teams. They did lose the one.
Maine South, hands down, has had the hardest schedule of the year to this point. They have literally, since week 1, been tested, and they only have 1 loss. honestly
Super
to the
close.
worst game on their slate. But we talked about this last week. Like they had some key injuries. That was the week after they lost Bobby and Sarah, and still were trying to figure it out. But they handled Glenbard West in week 1. Mount Carmel. I mean, like they've run through opponents. So I'm very curious to see what they do in the next few weeks. I did see a few notes like kind of floating around that Bobby and Sarah could potentially be back next week. I mean, we'll see if he's back next week. I'd love to see that at Niles North, but we'll see.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
When we mentioned a little bit before, but Lake Zurich 23, Stevenson 20 in overtime. Matt McGraw, the Lake Zurich quarterback, at his best game, he was 17 of 24, 225 yards and a touchdown. I guess Lake Zurich's demise has been exaggerated. They will probably be a big factor in the playoffs.
It was probably premature to draft them out of the rankings. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I think Lake Zurich, on the flip side, so talking about how Brother Rice is going to have to figure out, like, hit their stride with winning, Lake Zurich knows how to win.
Yeah.
I mean, once they do hit their stride, you find all the key pieces. Like, this is your time to figure it out. You're 4-1. You're going to be playoff eligible within the next couple of weeks. You just got to get in. And they remind me of a few of the Naperville Central teams of the past where you knew they had athletes, they have the pedigree, they know how to win, and you just got to get in the playoffs, and then they could absolutely win 5 games and win the state championship. That's how it goes.
Some other games just to mention quickly. I was out at Curie against Hubbard on Thursday. Curie won 13-6. It was a defensive battle. I got to say that this Curie team, the new coach, Arthur Ray, they're still figuring things out. They all seem really into it and happy about it and excited about the future, but they have a lot of kinks to work out. They seem to know that. This Curie team's not at the level of the last couple of years. The team that won the city a few years and got a playoff win. So maybe don't count on too much from them this season. Hubbard was interesting. They have not counting Phillips and Simeon, maybe the best defensive player I've seen in the city, Kenny Givens. He's a defensive end. He's a dominating force at defensive end. I guess last season he averaged 5 sacks a game, which...
That's ridiculous.
Yes, and he had 3 against Curie. He's just a monster. Wyoming and Western Michigan were both there to see him. He has a Wyoming offer. They want him quite badly, it appears. He also plays offensive lineman. A lot to work out with Hubbard, too. Things were a little rough, but Kenny Givens is a freak athlete. Also, Hillcrest, who we've not talked about at all. They beat Lamont 27-7. They're 5-0. And I keep hearing, Hillcrest basketball, I know a lot of people down in Country Club Hills. Marquise Irving, he is a sophomore running back. He's a basketball star. Started at Morgan Park and then went back to Hillcrest. But he's apparently one to watch. We'll keep our eyes on Hillcrest. They don't seem to have a test on their schedule.
No, I have every week looked at all of the teams that are undefeated, and you could absolutely make the rankings by like every single team that's undefeated. There are still a handful of 5-0 teams that are not in the rankings. Hoffman Estates, Glenbard East, Rolling Meadows, Arlington Heights, that aren't in, and that's the thing, right? We don't know where to. I don't know how to stack them up against anyone, and I'm not seeing like 57-0 every week. Yeah. And then it's like,
we thought Lamont was going to be their best test, but then Lamont hasn't had
the
a great season.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's too bad. We should mention Hope Academy for sure. Beating St. Lawrence, for a small school. We saw Hope Academy week 1 against Mount Carmel, and they were a very capable, talented young team. So that's just a huge kind of program making win for them to give them some momentum. And then on Saturday was the Jackson Classic, Raby and Westinghouse. It was my first look at Raby. That was interesting. Raby, I was a big proponent of Raby last year, and they, made me look good in a nice playoff run. They, like Curie, have a lot to work on, I think, and I think they're going to have their hands full with Simeon this week. They just don't seem to have the multitude of athletes they have the last couple of years. Maybe they can figure it out. Through sheer force of will, though, they think they're good. And a lot of times confidence really helps, especially in high school sports, and it really, really helped against Westinghouse because that game was close, a lot closer than probably it should have been or most people thought it would have been.
I feel like Raby is like the Simeon of years past. Like they always have athletes, and it's just how they work together, right? It
was an interesting, D'Angelo Darif, I didn't know this, but his defensive coordinator at Raby left for Westinghouse. So the guy knew everything that was happening in Cummings. That was a big problem in that game.
That actually would pose quite the problem, I think. Your whole defensive scheme is already on the table.
All right, game of the week. HF Lincoln Way East, maybe one of the biggest games, definitely one of the biggest games of the year.
Is anyone shocked? Number 1 versus number 4.
And I have seen Lincoln Way East, but not HF.
I've seen HF.
But not Lincoln Way. So I guess ill prepared to make predictions. I don't like making predictions when I haven't seen
I mean,
both teams.
at this point, I was very impressed with HF. The teams that I've been the most impressed with were Homewood Flossmoor, Brother Rice. That's why they're in the top 10 that I've seen live. After seeing HF's defense, I think if anyone can contend with Lincoln Way East, it's probably the Vikings. But Lincoln Way East has just blown everybody away.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you pick. I guess you got to pick number one.
I mean, Lincoln Way Central isn't a bad team, and they beat
No,
them
Lincoln Way Central's good.
They beat them 38-0 this week.
They didn't even score a point.
Yeah, so it's tough. I think Lincoln Way East, you got to make a pretty heavy favorite, even though it's supposed to be a good game. I don't know.
We'll see. I do think that this will be the biggest test of the whole year, probably for Lincoln Way East. At Homewood Flossmoor, so even like Coach Buzz, when I was out there, was talking about how he's having to like adjust his whole like demeanor to be like, we don't have to score 55 points a game. You know, we could potentially score 3 and still win a game, and that's not how he's coached or like really thought for the last few years. So I'm very curious to see with this like fairly new look HF defense, like how does Lincoln Way East respond? Everyone's so used to the Vikings just like putting points up on you, but also allowing you to put a ton of points up.
He's going to need more than 3 points.
I think so too.
They might have to go back to the high-scoring offense. And Leon Tana had another big game. I forget what it was exactly, but like 120, 160 yards. He's become one of the area's most dependable running backs, and he's going to have a huge game against Lincoln Way East for HF to have much of a chance, I think.
I feel like anyone to beat Lincoln Way East, they're going to have a huge game. Every single person on the field is going to have a huge game. But it's possible. I do think this is the one that is the biggest test that I wouldn't be like, okay, yep, it's Lincoln Way East this
We'll all
week.
be there. We'll have video highlights, the whole deal. Evanston, New Trier, the war on the shore, one of the big hyped rivalries in the whole area, and they're both having good years. You know, Evanston's having a much better year than people thought. I mean, they lost to Maine South, but there's no shame in that, clearly. So that's going to be a massive game. That one's at New Trier, and then one that's sort of become more interesting: Montini at Loyola on Saturday afternoon. Haven't decided where I'm going Saturday. I don't really want to watch Loyola again. No offense, I've already seen them twice. I'd like to see some new teams.
I'm really curious about Montini.
Yeah, me too. They have an Illinois recruit, Nick Fidanzo, the running back, so that's always fun. And yeah, they've been a fun team the last couple of years. This is a great chance for them to go and get a huge win.
And it's interesting too, like because Montini can come out on top, and we're going to be like, well, they're ranked ahead of them. Like, is it a huge win? But in terms of the Catholic League Blue, that is a huge win.
I mean, Montini's a smaller school, and they'd been in the white. They picked up their first ever Catholic League Blue win just this past week. They knocked off St. Rita, which is no small feat.
No, and Rita's quietly good this year too. They're not as good as last year, certainly, but they're definitely good.
They're in playoff trouble, though. I think they're 1-4 at this point, so Rita definitely needs some wins. And the other one, I like the St. Charles North versus St. Charles East. That's always a fun game, no matter whatever sport. Both teams are 4-1. St. Charles East is a team that's been really good the last couple of years, and I was impressed with again this year. It's going to have huge repercussions in that conference.
Both of them have some pretty big athletes to watch too. One of the best in the area is on St. Charles North, Tyler Newbin. Speaking of two-way players, wide receiver, defensive back. He's one of the most highly recruited kids in the area, and he's kind of like flown under the radar a little bit. This is a game that I have my eye on for sure for the rankings, because St. Charles East has been in our rankings this year. The one loss they had dropped them out of the rankings, but I do think that these two teams are absolutely like in that 26, 27, 28 conversation to be jumping in, along with like a Naperville Central and those and Notre Dame also in the conversation, and those 5-0 teams we talked about a little bit earlier.
Some other ones to look at: Glenbard West, hanging in there, number 9. We've not spoken about them much at all since that week 1 loss, but they play Lions on Saturday. It's another good Saturday game. Richards and Argo play one another, and Simeon Raby's at Gately. That's on Saturday night. I was just down in Raby a little bit, but
anything can happen.
Yeah, they're going to be up for that one. That's going to be another fun public league game on a Saturday night. Anybody else you want to mention this week? We've got a couple of minutes. Beth, Nazareth is at Carmel.
I mean, they've just been destroying people.
Yeah. And this J.J. McCarthy, this sophomore quarterback, his numbers he's putting up. I think Nazareth, out of the whole Super 25, they're the team I most want to see and I'm most curious about, because it seems like they could just be an absolute killer in the playoffs. And we rarely see, when's the last time we had a sophomore quarterback putting up numbers like this?
Not like this.
A good team.
When you look at the Super 25, so I'll repeat the top 3 for you. Lincoln Way East is number 1, number 2 is Batavia, number 3 is Nazareth. Even though Batavia and Nazareth are not 8A teams, I really feel like those 3 are kind of in a class of their own. Not to say they're unbeatable. because I do think that HF could knock off